so grateful for them. We've just joined our Twitter Live, YouTube Live, and Facebook Live feeds. So let's take off and have a wonderful conversation. Welcome to the Nonprofit Report, your update on nonprofit organizations, issues, and leaders. I'm your host, Mark Oppenheim, and today we are discussing water for Global South communities with our special guests, María, José, Terré, Feliú, the Executive International Director of Water is Life, Dr. María Okumu, Senior Director For Africa, and Eddie Brown, USA for Africa leader. And we're so honored to have all of our guests. A reminder to Zoom attendees that we'll take 3 snap polls during the show. We'll announce results, and your questions submitted to the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen will be included in our discussion. Now, I'm not seeing any of the guests show up on the videos, so I'm not sure what's going on here. Oscar, do you have any input there? Are we having a technical issue?
I think so, because I can't start mine. There we go.
You can't start.
Yes, my computer was stuck. Sorry about that.
Oh, okay. Well, you know, we're in the world of technology, but now we have you, and so Mary, are you able to start yours?
Yes. Thank you very much. Thank you for having us here, for the invitation, so we can talk about this important subject that is water.
Thank you, Kote. So let's start with you, Kote, since you've started this off. Tomorrow is Water Day.
Yes.
Water Day, and we wanted to take the opportunity to highlight your work to address water and sanitation for peoples in the Global South. So could you give us an overview of Water is Life, which I love the title, right? It's just so true, and it's so pregnant with meaning. Talk about your programs and the nature of your organization.
Yeah, I would love to. We all know that water is life, but we forget so, because just after the air and the oxygen that we need to survive and to live, immediately comes water. Then we think about food or shelter or education or health that are all absolutely directed and directly influenced by the access not to just water, but to safe water. Everyone always is talking about the access to water, the lack of water, the scarcity, but nobody really puts an emphasis in safe water. Because after living for a few years, I've been living 3 years in Nairobi in Kenya now, and we've seen realities, and there is water. We've seen rivers, we've seen lakes, there are so many boreholes, but the water coming from that water sources is not safe to drink. And what's the point of giving water to people if the water is contaminated and you cannot drink it, right? So one of the things that we do in Water is Life, and that we have been doing for the last 15 years, is develop different projects where there is no access to safe water. And how do we do that? We go there, we analyze the land, the location, we see where is that water source coming from, and we basically hear what are their needs. Sometimes we think that we know the answers, that we know solutions, but if we don't create these bonds, if we don't create relationships to understand, to hear, and to really comprehend what are their needs, there's no way that we can come up with a solution that would be sustainable in time. And even more important, if we don't involve the communities on being part of the solution. There's no way, and there's no sense of going to Africa or any other place in the world where there's no access to safe water, drilling a borehole and just taking a picture, getting back in your plane, going back to your country. And what happened with that solution after 6 months, after a year, if we didn't get them involved and responsible of the management and the administration of that solution.
So Mary, I see you nodding away there. So you endorse that idea of it's really local communities. So you might have expertise from outside of a local community, whether it's in country or from a different country. But you're nodding vigorously. Talk about your take on this idea that Kote is mentioning about local involvement, local ownership, local control and power over the resource.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Maria and colleagues. For Africa, our entry point is that partnership with the community. The whole idea of, we don't even say capacity building, because we find capacity building again coming from top and telling them what to do. We actually invest a lot in understanding what the community needs are from their perspective, identifying the skills that they have. They were there struggling with those water issues and health issues and nutrition issues even before we were there. So we listen very carefully to what their conceptualization of what their needs and what their problems are. And then we co-create, we go together with the community and jointly agree. They prioritize what they want to do, including if they say we fetch water from that point, we go with them. We accompany the communities in all our dealings, but in water, we again rely on the water points that they know, where the livestock gets water, where the human beings get water, and by human beings, it's mostly women and girls. And we then consult technical people to say, help us, here is what the community wants. And the communities are center to our water and sanitation programs. And so, yes, I agree very much about co-creating, co-facilitating what the communities, indigenous knowledge about these things that affect them. That is how we can sustain the investments that we generate with them.
We're going to get back to a lot of your points because we're going to deconstruct the issue of water and sanitation a bit. But Eddie, could you weigh in terms of your role here in USA for Africa, and how your role fits in this constellation of activities that we're discussing?
Yeah, thanks so much for that, Mark. I would say primarily my role is around fundraising. And as Dr. Mary alluded to, the capacity there is in the countries. I lived in Ethiopia for the last 6 years. Arbor Minch in southern Ethiopia has a university world-class for water, sanitation, hygiene, engineers, geologists. So often it isn't even an issue of capacity on the ground. It's just a matter of resource mobilization to do the things that you need to do. A borehole rig can cost millions of dollars. It's a highly expensive endeavor. It can cost $5,000 to $20,000 to drill a borehole. So you need that capital investment so that these things can be done. Ethiopia gets more rainfall than Western Europe. So again, the water's there, the people's capacity is there, the expertise is there. It's just a matter of mobilizing resources, not just from donor countries, but even within the countries. So for example, we raise a lot of money locally. We're doing a response right now to Cyclone Freddy in Mozambique. Local companies are donating to our efforts to save lives. And ironically, often with emergency response, where there's rainfall, where there's flooding, water, good water, potable water becomes the issue. So yeah, it's a combination of raising funds on this side of the pond, as it were, US, Canada, our other affiliate offices for Africa and Europe. But again, it's mobilizing so that people on the ground can actually do the work.
Now, this is really important. So we're going to deconstruct this model, this workflow, this cash flow, this human knowledge flow in this. If we're talking about water and sanitation, we have a whole range of different issues. We have the issue of moving water to where it's needed, from where it is to where it's needed. That can be done by humans just putting water in vessels and walking. It can be done through pipes, but pipes then can get tapped into, and then the water can sort of dissipate as people appropriate it because, you know, those pipes are unguarded, right? So there needs to be buy-in on how this whole system will work. There needs to be funding, as you said, Eddie. You need to have money flowing to projects where there's needed, and there needs to be administration on the ground. There's the issue of water is not just water. You need to have, as Cote mentioned, you need to have water that is consumable, that does not come with bacteria or mineral contaminants, right? There are all these different issues. So, Cote, could you talk a little bit about how you view the problem set and start to describe the various measures that you take to ensure that your projects are able to deliver the benefit that you intend to the people to whom you intended
Yeah, it has to do absolutely what we've been talking. It's getting the communities involved, and usually it's not just doing what you think it's going to be good for.
Does it start with community involvement? Do you, when you're thinking about a project, do you first go to the community and say, what do you need? How does a project start?
How does a project start? We got one last year in a slum in Nairobi that's called Soweto. Okay, so they had a borehole that was obsolete, that was not functioning since a few years ago because no one was in charge. So what we did is we unblocked the borehole, and we saw that it was still usable. It was working. It just needed to some machinery and some additional work. But then just after that, we realized that we had to put someone in charge. And usually what we do is identify the women that are community leaders, because they are the ones that have to go and walk for miles and fetch the water every day. They are the ones responsible for bringing that water back home so they can wash, they can clean, they can cook, they can do all the daily tasks that where you need water to do themselves. So we identified Connie, she is our community leader there, and we said, we can't do this without you. And you have to help us to convince as well the whole rest of the community that this is good for them. And as long as everyone participates and as long as everyone becomes committed to what we're doing, this is going to be able to be a solution in the long term. Because then you have to also speak to the elders. And we didn't know how to speak that dialect. I know a bit of Swahili, but then we have to bring someone else that is part of Water is Life in Nairobi, so she can translate, and we can start telling the elders, what are we going to do to benefit the community, giving them access to safe water. But it's a whole thing. It's a 360. Everyone has to be involved and aware of how this is going to change the lifestyle. Otherwise, there's no way that you can do it.
And it starts with, you point out some really interesting attributes, and I'd like to move to Mary to have you comment, Mary, but you have a local request, right? We have a borehole, doesn't seem to be working. You then bring in expertise. Now the expertise is interesting because you have technical expertise, you have linguistic expertise, right? You have community expertise. You're dealing with the social constructs of men and women and their various roles within those communities. You're dealing with the elders, again, another social construct, right? So that you have respect. Mary, could you talk a little bit about that idea of respecting different forms of expertise, different forms of knowledge? Because if you don't respect that, then you're likely to make mistakes. Could you talk a little bit about how that actually ought to function in this world today?
Thank you, Mark. Yes, the roles and responsibility, including children, depending on where the actual location of a water project, a toilet is going to be placed. Sometimes it is in the school, sometimes it is in the village, sometimes it is in a health facility, sometimes it is in the market, as during COVID. We had to put hand wash everywhere. So you understand the governance structure of that community from the elders, as Maria has said. You seek their guidance, what has happened in water and sanitation before in this community. And what were the results? What were the challenges? And you want to learn before you decide what, which, where, that understanding of what you're dealing with. If it is in a school, you engage the school management board. The governments, for Africa, we respond to government development plans. And these government development plans go to the last mile. And so if it is within a district, you sit with the district teams. The district teams will be the ones now holding your hands through that mechanism up to the last mile in the village. So everybody has a role in helping to understand, was there any water project or a school feeding program? What happened? If it is because of a disaster, that's a completely different scenario, entering a humanitarian emergency with the investments in water and sanitation. Those ones are normally guided by the UN and the local government authority. If it is within the context of sustainable, normal peacetime development, what Maria has defined absolutely holds until you form committees in one project, water and sanitation, going back, Mark, to the role of men, the role of women, the role of girls, the role of teachers. So there are layers and layers of governance that must come together and agree with you. And then you then identify what community skills, where are the artisans, where is the water going to be tested, and working very closely with government entities that also already have a plan on how you enter and how you exit.
And it strikes me, Mary, that it starts with first being humble, right? I'm a fairly intelligent person, but if I came into that environment, I would be the most ignorant, useless person in the room. That's true. That's just true. That's just a fact. I just don't have any knowledge, right? So.
And we don't have the knowledge of the local communities. We really don't. And therefore, that respect, we talk about the dignity of people, but just making that inquiry about what has happened here, who are the leaders, just giving them that hearing, that platform for them to be heard, for them to make the decisions with you. They will inform you. You know, you can go to a community and they'll watch you. If you think you know, yeah. They will watch you fail, and then they will just walk away and you will be calling meetings under trees. Nobody will be coming because you thought you knew.
Right, exactly. And so when Eddie, when you're raising money for this kind of a situation, your donors need to be informed. They need to come from a particular place of respect, because although if money comes without respect, it will still be taken. It actually has a different impact, right? If donors are willing to open themselves up as people who in this situation live in ignorance and wish with their donation to listen and learn and make a contribution, but also be willing to accept the contribution of others, it makes a real difference, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And my favorite field trip is to take donors to see us hit water, because you drill and it can take time, and the geologists, the engineers, they can have a sense, okay, they're monitoring everything, and so they can tell you, okay, we're going to hit water tomorrow or maybe the day after that. And when you go with donors to see that, it's something so tangible. So kids are celebrating, water's flowing, and it connects us as human beings. We all need water every day. We can live days without food. We can't live very long without water. So it's that human connection that I think is powerful. And just to allude to something Dr. Mary said earlier, she mentioned COVID. You know, water is life. We've all said that, but water is also connected to everything else in life. Food. If you don't have water to irrigate your crops, you won't be able to harvest food. Health. Obviously, there's a lot of waterborne diseases, and what we learned during COVID, we've been trying to convince people, wash your hands, you know, do these basic hygiene principles, and COVID made it real, very tangible. And so we hope that sticks. That's one of the silver linings of COVID, is around increased attention to sanitation and hygiene, not just access to water. Maybe another piece that's also very powerful is the impact of water, particularly on girls, because girls often have that responsibility of carrying it on their head. It can take hours if it's far distance away, and that can keep them out of school. If there's not hygiene and sanitation materials at the school, separate latrines for girls and boys, that can prevent girls from going to school. And the walking, the distance, one of the greatest risks for girls is often long distances, late at night, early morning. They can be subject to horrible things. So there's child protection issues related to water as well. So the closer we can bring water to communities, to households, the better off girls are, and the community in general.
Can we talk about
Let me
this
add something
issue?
to that, Eddie, if I can add something. Sorry, Mark.
Oh, sure, Cote.
Yeah, as you were saying, it impacts everything. As you said, health and education, also environment. We've realized that when we bring a filtration system, they don't have to boil the water anymore, or they don't have to buy it and take it from the budget that it's very little in order to buy bottled water. And that's when it's directly impact to the environment, because there's no combustion, there's no pollution anymore. And that it's absolutely directed to our consciousness. I'm here in New York right now, and I was a few weeks ago in Chile, where you can drink water from the tap. And I was asking my friends, why are we in a restaurant, and why are we asking for bottled water? Why are we contaminating with plastic? Why are we spending extra money if we can really drink water from the tap? Can anyone explain that to me?
Yeah, well, these issues are interconnected, because those plastics find their way into the food chain, and then we eat them, and then we're poisoning ourselves with them, and then we have health problems. I'd like to stay with you, though, Cote, and talk a little bit about the fact that we have two men on this show, and we have two women, and we've been talking a lot about the role of women within different cultural contexts, within different communities. Could you just comment, and then I'd like to go to Mary, in terms of this whole idea of how do you respect the cultural attributes of people on the ground, and take advantage of their knowledge of what works within their communities and the various challenges that men and women face. It seems to me that we have a grand debate going on in different societies about empowering women and how men and women interact. How does this unfold in your observation, Cote? And then Mary, if you could also comment in terms of are these projects creating a different platform in which this dialogue between men and women and empowerment within those societies functions? Cote, would you care to comment on that?
I can just tell you about what I've seen, and that's based on my experience living in Kenya for the last 3 years, and I lived for 6 months in Angola, in Tanzania. I've been in Ghana, in Uganda, and I've seen that women are the ones that are the responsibles of bringing water, and without water you can just do nothing at all. And they are the ones that are taking care of the children, taking care of the house. They're the ones that are working on the land. I've seen women very, very much empowered in the way that they are the ones doing pretty much all the work.
Are the men, are us men listening to the women in these different cultures so that we're
No,
not?
not at all.
We're not. So the men are not. Mary, you're smiling. Are men not listening to women?
It takes that process of consultation again and respecting those social roles with the intention of creating the dignity of even the men. When men see that now water is near the home, or there is water in that school X, and their women don't have to walk, honestly, 3 to 4 hours a day, and girls can go to school.
Yeah.
There are societies that it is slow, the listening to the women, but empowered women make incredibly resourceful communities and households. And the men, sometimes they feel threatened by that empowerment, but when you facilitate that equilibrium, you do find it. Where there have been conflict, Mark, in a refugee camp, is the women and children who will arrive there first.
Mhm.
Yes, and so there are, in where we are working, they are being listened to because they do add value by what they do. But socially, the social constructs of water is a woman's responsibility. But when it comes to the drilling, the men do play a role in drilling. So there are, you can't compartmentalize it by saying, no, they don't. Sometimes there are friction areas, but that's part of why we are there, to help them to focus on the access of safe drinking water. When water is near home for animals, it's the men who go and tend to cows and sheep outside. So when the water is near, they also celebrate. In South Sudan, in northern Uganda, in Rwanda, in Mozambique, when calamities strike, everybody is affected, and you support the ones. We have water committees that have both men and women in the management that Maria was talking about. Once the borehole is rehabilitated, we do have water management committees that comprise of men and women.
So part of this, Mary, is that we need to have respect from the G7 and G20 sources of funding, the wealthier nations that are sources of funding, for those peoples that are absorbing the funding. There needs to be mutuality there, but also on the ground between men and women, there also needs to be mutuality. If we end up with mutuality, we end up with a more peaceful resolution. We have a quicker resolution. Everybody feels involved. Everybody feels ownership. This idea of mutuality is so powerful. And it starts with listening and respect on all sides, whether it's within a community, between men and women. That's your point, right?
Yes, thank you. And
well, I'm just listening to you and repeating your point.
And it is happening. It is, no, you heard me. You heard us correctly. And it is happening. And whether it is in the school board or the parent teacher association board that is going to manage the water, or whether it is in schools where boys and girls go to school together, you do bring that mutuality. And there is mutuality when the resources are available enough, then people don't have to have conflict. It's not only men and women. Women can fight over being on the line. They've worked 7 hours, they're now on this line. If another colleague comes and just goes in front of her to put her jerry can in front, there will be a scuffle. And so that mutuality, we are facilitating those dialogues extremely well. And we are finding respect, that we talk about the dignity of men and women and boys and girls. It is coming. I mean, for Africa has been there for 37 years. In the communities that we work, we are advancing and facilitating that mutual agency of voice, agency of consulting for them to contribute their ideas on what they feel are their solutions.
Thank you, Mary. Eddie, we're going to give you a word, and then we're going to give Kote you the last word. Eddie, I just want to ask you about this idea of mutuality as you as in your fundraising role. How do you deal with this idea of creating a relationship that is more sustained and less transactional, less power-based, and more equality-based? When you're asking somebody to give of their money, they're not going to get anything material back, right? They're not going to get anything material back. They're going to get something else back. What is the thing that they get back, and how do you end up with a situation where you have mutuality, respect, and sustained investment as opposed to a transactional one?
Yeah, thanks for that question. So, for Africa, we started very much as a church-based organization. Our founder was an evangelist in South Africa, and he was very struck by what he saw during the war in Mozambique. So for us, our history, our foundation is around church-to-church partnerships. So I think that builds relationships at a community level. Obviously, a lot of NGOs have child sponsorship. I think that's another powerful way where you connect people. So it's not just about giving. It's not just about charity. It's about connecting. It's about people feeling a sense of shared human experience. Like I said, with that example of seeing the water hit in a borehole, we all have basic human needs. We need water, we need protection, we need food. And so I think it's getting away from that charity mentality and getting towards this human connection mentality. You see it more now, I think, with the internet being ubiquitous and people having more access, that intermediary role that humanitarian organizations, development organizations have played is transforming, so that there's less of a gap, a communication gap. People can speak in real time. People can see what's happening. We post on our website videos of the impact of people's giving, so that they don't have to wait for a report 6 months later, 3 months later. They can see in real time the impact, and that motivates them to give, because they can see the impact that it's having, and they can see the connection that we're all in this together.
So, Kote, I'd like to give you the last word, and the thing that I'd love for you to comment on is how we should all function in this world to help resolve this global problem of water. But I want to just read back a couple of the results of the polls. First of all, 100% of the people who responded, and we have a select audience here, think that this issue of accessibility to water is one of globally the top issues that we all face. So the fact that there might be an issue in the global South or an issue in different parts of the United States, that's actually given one particular footing. In other words, access to water is essential for everyone. That was 100%. Then we talked about what is the major issue, and the major issue seems to be a consensus that water is available, but not necessarily accessible. And so if we bring resources to bear, we can solve the problem. And the third poll, which is still ongoing, it's really interesting, the results there. About a quarter of the people responding said that fixing this issue of water is a problem that can only be solved by global South governments within their country. 63%, 2/3 of those responding said it's a collaboration among global South governments, G20 governments, international NGOs, local people on the ground, basically the model that you have. Very interesting. But those were the only answers that were given. There was there was some respondents who said that the answers were not included. So this is it's just sort of a really interesting encapsulation. Kote, what is the act that we should take next? We should all take next to improve the situation. How should we move in the world? How should I move in the world to help you in your mission?
First of all, I totally agree with what Eddie was saying. This is transforming. And when you ask, what do we give companies or different supporters that make us or that give us the funds so we can develop different projects? It's a transforming experience. We were doing one of our projects in Chile at the end of last year, and we took the clients of one of our biggest partners to give out the filtration systems to people that live in unsettled and in informal settlements, and they were the ones in charge to change the people's lives through these bucket filters that we gave them. And what they lived, their experience was so incredible that there's a before and after. After you feel that, after you've done something with your own hands, after you've become involved personally with other people that haven't been this lucky, you will never want to stop doing this again. So that's what we give. It's a life experience. It's becoming a better human being. And when you realize that, you have to know that in the same way that we were talking about how we go to a slum, how we go to a village, and we have to get all the actors involved, the women, the men, the teachers, the children, we have to do the same thing outside there. Public sectors, companies, the governments, people, we have to get all involved together so we can make this happen and we can give them a solution that will change their lives forever.
A fantastic admonition to take us out. María Cote, José Terré Feliú, Executive International Director of Water is Life, Dr. Mary Okumu, Senior Director of For Africa, and Eddie Brown, USA For Africa President. Thank you so much for sharing your work, sharing your knowledge, sharing your expertise, and please thank your donors, your staff, your boards, and your communities who are helping to guide you in your work. Thank you so much, and really very much appreciated.